There's something about this Tracy Cortez and Melissa Gatto fight that I'm really, really excited about and interested in. And the big thing for me is, Tracy Cortez is one of those fighters where, and I'm like this with MMA and sports in general, but I really love digging to find the up-and-comers. I love finding the people that nobody knows about, trying to get their names out there, and frankly, watching that kind of show blossom into something. And Tracy Cortez is just that. You think about the Aaron Blanchfield fight and just how well that fight has aged. Erin Blanchfield is slowly becoming a big, big name in the UFC from a prospect perspective. She's putting on dominant performances. She's looking really good as she climbs the ladder and takes on better competition. But then you tell yourself that Tracy Cortez actually beat her when they were much younger, and you think about what this fight actually means from a prospect in MMA, for women's MMA in the flyweight division. I think it's massive. I think that Tracy Cortez has not only shown some pretty good improvements as she's become a better striker with Fight Ready. That camp really does do a great job of turning wrestlers into MMA fighters, and Tracy Cortez is just that. But there's a few red flags with her that I want to point out. But let's get into Melissa Gatto for a little bit. I am such a fan of watching Melissa Gatto fight, and she comes in clean shape. She's got very crisp striking. It might not be versatile, but it's clean. The 1-2s, the kicks that she throws. She finished her Sijara Eubanks fight with a body kick. It's like you're supposed to be watching this grappler come to light, but her striking is just getting better and better and better. And you look at the red flags that we just talked about with Tracy Cortez. So that Justine Kish is an example where, for me, despite it being as long as it has been since we've watched Tracy fight, that is Justine Kish, who was on the verge of getting cut, who ended up going to Bellator. And in that fight, how close she was able to make it, especially in that second and third round, it showed some glaring holes in Tracy Cortez's game, because unless Tracy can find ways to do big damage in the first round and then start dominating you with her wrestling and ground and pound, she tends to struggle. I think that the footwork is a work in progress. I think that the movement and the combos to go with it is a work in progress. But with Gatto, I don't see that. With Gatto, I see the opportunity to, if she can avoid the wrestling style pressure and the takedowns, she tends to do pretty well on the feet. And the good thing about her is that cardio, man. She was barely breathing hard after that Sijara Eubanks fight, and she spent some time on her back. She was working a lot in the clinch. She was working a lot to get away from takedowns. And that's where, for me, I don't know how this fight is being billed right now. Obviously, I don't look at any lines or anything going to it. I just do research based on tape and seeing where fighters are at that point. And right now I'm leaning towards Tracy Cortez as a minus 200 favorite in Vegas's eyes. I think there's a lot of bump there, recency bias, fan favoritism. And let's be real, I'm curious what those Brian Ortega and Korean Zombie encounters are like at Fight Ready in Arizona. But, outside of that, you just think about the fact that, Melissa Gatto tapped Carol Rosa at 22 years old. Like, Carol Rosa is a bona fide UFC fighter. She puts on great performances and is also climbing the ranks. And that's where, for me, you see little things like that on fighters' records. It's like, regardless of how good or bad Carol Rosa might have been before or getting there or whatever it is, at 22 years old, Melissa Gatto was able to tap Carol Rosa, who is now a bona fide UFC fighter. And when you think about 22 years old in MMA, that's a big deal. And in this fight, it's like, I'm sorry, but the striking that I saw from Gatto, I don't know, I'm being apologetic. It's almost like I don't want the Tracy Cortez fan base to just completely hate me, but I think Melissa Gatto is going to be highly underrated in this fight. And to be honest, it's so tough to call, because I think that there's a cardio factor against Tracy Cortez that Gatto, as a striker and as a grappler, can do a lot of damage in the second and third rounds based on what we saw from Cortez against Justine Kish. So right now, I like Cortez as a minus 200 favorite, but in my head, this fight's a pick-em. I really think I think it's really close in the sense that if Cortez doesn't do crazy damage in the early parts of this fight, gets the ground and pound, gets some good takedowns, kind of shatters the will of her opponent, I think that Gatto's second half ability is going to really show up in this fight, because Cortez could be tired from trying to execute so much, and Gatto's been able to deal with the wrestlers coming forward and then pick up her pace as those opportunities come around. So, like I said, Cortez minus 200 favorite, but I think this is pretty much a pick'em. So let's take a look. So yeah, Cortez minus 190 opener. So we were there with that minus 200. Gatto plus 155 dog. And now she's about a plus 130 to a plus 140 dog, with Tracy Cortez now approaching that minus 150 to minus 160 line. So this again is starting to come closer and closer. And like I said, man, all of this action is coming from the sharps and the guys who pay a lot more attention to it and are starting to move these lines a little bit. And if you look at all of the lines that we've seen, a lot of these big favorites that opened are starting to come a little bit closer to maybe not that pick'em line, but on average, a lot closer. So I think a lot of these fights are going to be closer than people think. Makes them exciting. Pick your betting spots carefully because this is a great one where I might like the dog both as a pick and as a bet. So keep it locked, SookyMMA. Don't forget to subscribe and like. We got plenty more fights, so stay tuned.